Some nights were never meant to be quiet. There's something about a dark, silent night, where the wind feels colder, and every creak sounds like a warning. It's on nights like this that the world feels thinner, where shadows seem to move and you're no longer sure if you're really alone. Tonight you'll hear 10 terrifying stories, each one perfect for a night as heavy and uneasy as this one. Stories of doors that opened without reason, of voices heard from empty rooms, of dreams that bled into reality. These aren't tales told around campfires. They're experiences burned into memory by those who lived them. So if you're here, lights off and headphones on, welcome. You've just stepped into a night that may not let you sleep again. What if the darkness you fear isn't just in your mind, but standing right in front of you, watching, waiting? In 2017, I was a mental health worker in a psychiatric hospital, a place so old it seemed to carry the weight of every scream, every tear shed within its walls. The building was a labyrinth of faded paint and chipped tiles, its corridors reeking of antiseptic mixed with something sour, something that clung to your skin like a memory you couldn't shake. Step into that place with me. Feel the air grow, heavy, pressing against your chest. My nights were bound to routine, a fragile shield against the chaos of minds unraveling around me. Every 15 minutes I walked the Q15 safety rounds, my footsteps echoing in the silence, my eyes scanning for signs of danger, someone lost to their despair or worse, turning it on themselves or others. You can't look away, not here, not ever. My core unit was my sanctuary, where I knew every creak of the rusted bed frames, every slant of moonlight through the blinds, every soft breath of the patients I'd grown to care for, though I'd never say it aloud. Their faces, etched with battles no one else could see, were my tether to the world. But that night, everything changed. They sent me floating, a word that sounded harmless but felt like being cast into a sea of shadows. Imagine being torn from safety, dropped into a place where nothing feels right. Floating meant working a different unit, a stranger's territory, where the air tasted wrong, where the walls seemed to lean in, whispering secrets you weren't meant to hear. I didn't mind usually. A change could break the monotony, offer a fleeting sense of control in a place that thrived on chaos. But as I stepped into Unit 4B, the hospital felt alive in a way it shouldn't have. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows that moved when I didn't. The air was colder, heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. Feel that chill, the way it crawls under your skin. It was 2 a.m., the witching hour when the world seemed to blur between reality and nightmare, and I began my rounds, my flashlight a dim lifeline in my trembling hand. Each room had a small window, a fragile barrier between me and the darkness inside. 3 patients to a room, 3 souls clinging to sleep or sedatives, their peace as delicate as glass. Picture their faces, lost in dreams or trapped in torment. I moved carefully, my footsteps soft, knowing how a single sound could shatter their fragile calm. Some carried ghosts in their minds, PTSD that turned a stray light into a war zone, a creak into a gunshot. I never opened the doors unless I had to, instead directing my flashlight through the window, aiming the beam at the far wall to avoid startling them. But when I reached room 17, something stopped me dead. Freeze with me. Feel your heart skip. A beat. My beam hit the wall and there it was, a silhouette stark and wrong standing between the beds. A 4th figure, tall and unmoving, draped in a long coat that seemed to drink the light. My stomach churned, my breath catching in my throat like a trapped animal. 3 beds, 3 bodies, rise, fall, all accounted for. But this was something else. It knew I was watching and it wanted me to know. Time stopped, the world narrowing to that single impossible shape. My mind raced, grasping for logic. Maybe a patient had slipped through the shared bathroom, a sleepwalker lost in the dark. But you know some things can't be explained. I'd seen it before. Patients wandering, chasing shadows of their own making. I eased the door open, my hand shaking so badly the flashlight beam danced across the wall. The air inside was freezing, heavy with the sour tang of sleep and something older, something that coated my tongue like ash. The three patients lay still, their chests rising and falling, lost in dreams or drugs. But the fourth figure was gone, vanished like mist under sunlight. Feel the emptiness, the way it mocks your certainty. I swung my flashlight around, searching every corner, every shadow, but found only beds, blankets, and the faint hum of the hospital's pulse. The bathroom door was steps away, its handle cold under my fingers. I pushed it open, heart pounding, expecting, hoping for an answer. Nothing. No patient. No hiding spot. Then the truth hit me like a fist. This room had no connecting door. It was a dead end, a sealed box of plaster and silence. Whatever I'd seen had been here, standing like a sentinel, and now it wasn't. My hands shook as I backed out, the door closing with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in my ears. You're not alone even when you pray you are. I tore through the unit, checking every patient against the roster, desperate to anchor myself to reality. Every head was where it should be, tucked into beds or pacing their own fractured worlds. No extras, no escapees, just the number we'd started with. But I'd seen it, clear as the goosebumps on my arms. A figure whole and solid, its coat sharp against the dimness like a blade. I stumbled back to the nursing station, my breath ragged, and spilled everything to Sarah, a nurse with kind eyes and a voice like warm gravel, someone who'd worn the hospital's weight for years. She didn't flinch. "I've seen things too," she said, her words a quiet confession. Listen to her. Her story is a mirror to your fear. Sarah leaned closer, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the desk lamp. She told me of a night a decade ago when she'd seen a half-ghost, a torso and head floating above a bed. No legs, no sense, like a balloon cut free from its tether. Picture it. A shape that shouldn't exist, staring back at you. She'd been checking room 12, her flashlight catching the figure midair. Its face blurred, but its eyes sharp, locking onto hers. She'd frozen, unable to move, until it faded into the dark. She never looked through windows after that, sticking to her clipboard, her routine, her sanity. My figure was different, I told her. Full-bodied, grounded, a shadow in a coat that didn't drift but stood, watching, waiting. What do you do when the impossible feels more real than you? Sarah's story was a warning, a nested echo of my own terror, but it offered no answers, only more questions. I couldn't shake the image of that figure. Its presence burned into my mind like a photograph. Was it a ghost? A soul trapped in these walls? Let yourself sink into that question, let it pull you under. This hospital was ancient, its foundation soaked in decades of suffering, patients strapped to beds, their minds shattered, some never leaving alive. I'd heard stories from older staff, whispered over coffee in the break room. A patient in the 60s restrained too tightly, gone before morning. A nurse in the 80s found in the basement, her death ruled an accident, but her eyes wide with terror. Feel the weight of those stories, the way they linger in the air. The walls held their pain, their fear, their final breaths, and I wondered if that's what I'd seen. A memory replaying, a moment burned into the ether, or something worse, something alive in its own way, hunting for someone to notice it. Tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, the late hour weaving shadows into monsters, but deep down you know the truth. My body didn't believe the lie. My hands still trembled, my skin still prickled with the memory of that cold, heavy air. I finished my shift in a daze, avoiding room 17, avoiding every window, my flashlight gripped like a weapon. When I left, at dawn the hospital loomed behind me, its windows like eyes watching my retreat. You can leave, but some things follow. Months later I quit, unable to face those corridors again, but the figure stayed with me, a shadow in my dreams, standing at the edge of my vision, its coat swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. Close your eyes, do you see it too? I drive by the hospital sometimes, its silhouette unchanged, still swallowing, the pain of those inside. Each time I feel it watching, its walls holding secrets no one dares name. Sarah's still there, I heard, still walking her rounds, still avoiding windows. I don't blame her. What would you do if you knew looking might break you? That night taught me something. There are things in this world that don't belong, things that stand just outside your understanding, waiting for you to look. And once you do, you can never unsee them. They become part of you, a quiet ache in your bones, a shadow that lingers long after the light is gone. The air in the office was thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice something I wasn't ready to see. I was 23, a night shift worker in a sprawling, dimly lit building that hummed with secrets it refused to share. For over a year I'd walked these halls, my footsteps echoing in the quiet, my breath steady as I manned the desk, answered calls, and watched the world outside sleep. The graveyard shift, they called it, and I'd laughed at the name once, until the night the building stopped feeling like a workplace and started feeling like a cage. At first, everything was ordinary. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a pale glow over the beige walls. The coffee machine gurgled in the break room, its bitter scent curling through the air. I'd sit at my station, scrolling through reports, the hum of the computer, grounding me in the monotony. The building was old, its bones creaking under the weight of years, but it felt safe, predictable. I'd never believed in ghosts, never felt the need to look over my shoulder. That changed one night, when the ordinary cracked open and let something else slip through. It started with a sound, a heavy, deliberate thud that shook the silence. My coworker Sarah froze mid-sentence, her eyes darting to mine. We were alone, the two of us, in a building locked tight against the world. The sound came from the hallway, where a massive metal door separated our office from the storage wing. It wasn't a door that moved easily. It took force, intent to make it close. We waited, breath held, expecting the shuffle of an officer's boots or the jangle of keys. But the hallway stayed silent, the air growing heavier as if the building itself was watching us. Sarah grabbed my arm, her voice low. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my pulse quickening. We ran to the window overlooking the hallway, pressing our faces against the cold glass. Nothing, no one came out. No one could have. The cameras, useless and grainy, showed an empty corridor, but the weight of that sound lingered, like a warning carved into the air. We tried to laugh it off, to blame the wind or a loose hinge, but the unease clung to us. We stayed together that night, huddled in the office, our eyes flicking to the door every few minutes. The shift ended with the dawn, and we left without answers, the building's silence mocking us as we stepped into the morning light. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of tired minds, but deep down I knew better. Something had stirred, and it wasn't done with me. Months passed, and the building began to show its true face. I was sent to the evidence room one night, a cavernous space tucked in the basement, lit by two flickering bulbs that barely pushed back the shadows. The air down there was different, stale, heavy, like it had been trapped for decades. I'd never spent much time in the room, but curiosity pulled me in. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness, holding boxes of forgotten cases, each one a story of loss or violence. A glass display case caught my eye, its surface smudged with time. Inside were crime scene photos, grainy images of places and people I didn't want to know. I couldn't look away, my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand as I traced the outlines of those frozen moments. The faces in the photos seemed to watch me back, their eyes empty but alive, pulling me into a story I didn't want to hear. I grabbed what I needed and left, my steps quick, the air pressing against my back. When I returned later to put the items back, the room felt wrong. The shadows seemed to shift, curling at the edges of my vision. My chest tightened, a sudden, inexplicable fear clawing at me. I told myself it was just the dim light, the weight of the place, but my body screamed to leave. I hurried out, the door closing behind me with a thud that echoed too long. That night I dreamed of the photos, of faces that moved, their mouths opening in silent screams. When I woke, the fear was still there, coiled in my chest like a living thing. The incidents grew more frequent, each one chipping away at my sense of safety. I'd hear voices in empty offices, low murmurs that stopped. When I turned to listen, a shadow darted across the hallway, too quick to be real, too solid to be my imagination. I'd blink, and it was gone, leaving only the echo of my own heartbeat. Once, I swore I saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor, tall and dark, its edges sharp against the flickering light. I called out, thinking it was a coworker, but the hallway was empty when I checked. No one was there. No one could have been. The building was locked, the roster accounted for. Yet the air felt alive, charged with a presence I couldn't name. The night it all came to a head, I was alone at my station, the clock ticking past 3 a.m. My coworkers had left for calls, leaving me with the hum of the building and the weight of the dark. I'd turned off the overhead lights to ease a headache, letting the soft glow of my computer screen light the room. Then I heard it. The main door, heavy and unmistakable, opening and closing with a force that rattled my bones. My eyes snapped to the security feed, expecting to see someone in the lobby, maybe an officer returning early. The screen showed nothing, just an empty room, the shadows pooling in the corners. I waited, my breath shallow, listening for footsteps, a voice, anything. Silence. I told myself I'd imagined it, but the air felt wrong, like it was pressing against me, watching me. I stood, my legs unsteady, and flipped on the lights. The sudden brightness stung, but it revealed something worse. In the kitchen, 2 cabinets stood wide open, their contents untouched but exposed, as if someone had been searching for something. I knew those cabinets had been closed. I'd checked them earlier, a habit born of routine. My heart pounded as I approached, my hand shaking as I reached to close them. And then, impossibly, they were closed again, as if I'd never seen them open. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, the room spinning around me. The air grew colder, heavier, and I felt it. A presence, close and deliberate, like someone standing just behind me. Something brushed the hair behind my ear, a light, deliberate touch that sent ice down my spine. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The chair behind me creaked, a slow, deliberate sound like someone settling into it, watching me. I could feel their gaze, heavy and unyielding, boring into the back of my neck. My hands gripped the desk, my eyes locked on the screen, too afraid to turn around. The room was empty, I knew it was, but the feeling was undeniable. Someone or something was there, its presence wrapping around me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in that moment, the world reduced to the thud of my heart and the weight of that unseen gaze. Finally, I found the courage to move, to stumble to the kitchen and check the cabinets again. They were closed, just as they'd been, but the air felt different, charged with a quiet menace. I called an officer, begging him to stay with me until my shift ended. He stood in the doorway, his presence a fragile anchor against the fear that clung to me. Those final 20 minutes stretched into eternity, every sound amplified, every shadow a threat. I took the next week off, desperate to escape the building's grip. When I returned, the incident stopped, as if the place had decided I'd seen enough. But the feeling never left. Even now, months later, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, waiting for the air to shift, for the shadows to move. The building is haunted, I'm sure of it. Not by ghosts, maybe, but by something older, something that knows my name and watches me still. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I feel it again. That touch behind my ear, that slow creak of the chair, reminding me I'm never truly alone. In 2022, I lived in Akron, Ohio, a town where the nights were so quiet the silence felt alive, a presence that watched you from the shadows. I worked late shifts testing gas stations, driving home through empty streets where the streetlights flickered like fading pulses, their dim glow swallowed by the vast unyielding dark. By the time I pulled into my driveway at 2:45 a.m., my body was heavy with exhaustion, my eyes burning from hours under harsh fluorescent lights. Step into that moment. Feel the night's weight pressing against your chest. My house was a small, weathered box at the edge of the neighborhood, its backyard bordered by a flimsy wooden fence that separated me from the neighbor's yard. Beyond that, a dense wall of woods loomed, their twisted branches clawing at the sky, whispering secrets older than the town itself. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting my cheeks, and the sky was empty. No moon, no stars, just a blackness so thick it felt like it could swallow me whole. I opened the back door to let my dogs out, Rusty and Luna, two scrappy mutts who bounded into the yard, their paws crunching on the frost-kissed grass. Picture them, carefree, unaware of the darkness watching. I stood on the porch, my breath fogging in the frigid air, watching them sniff and circle, their familiar routine a small anchor against the oppressive night. I'd done this 100 times, a ritual as steady as my own heartbeat. But tonight something was wrong. A feeling crept over me, slow at first, then relentless. A pull, like a hand gripping my insides, urging me to look toward the neighbor's yard. You felt it, haven't you? That whisper that says you're not alone. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the dogs, on the outline of my truck parked nearby, on the safety of my own home. But the urge grew, a voice in my head chanting, "Look, just look." It wasn't curiosity, it was compulsion, as if something out there demanded my attention, demanded I see it. I stepped off the porch, my boots sinking into the soft, frozen earth, my heart beating faster with every step. Pause here. Feel the chill crawling up your spine. I leaned just enough to peer around the corner of my house, my eyes straining against the darkness. The neighbor's yard was a patch of shadow, their wooden fence a frail barrier against the woods beyond, where the trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. And there, at the far edge of the yard, where the grass met the tree line, stood something. Freeze with me. Let the fear take hold. It was tall, 6, maybe 7 feet, its skin a pale, unnatural white, glowing faintly as if lit from within, though the night was pitch black. No clothes, no hair, just a smooth, muscular form, human-like but wrong, its surface unbroken by eyes, mouth, or any trace of humanity. See it in your mind, that glowing, impossible shape, standing where it shouldn't. My stomach twisted, my breath caught in my throat like a trapped bird. I gripped the corner of my house, my fingers digging into the rough wood, desperate to anchor myself to something real. The dogs were silent, their usual barking swallowed by the weight of the moment. The air grew heavier, thicker, pressing against my chest like a warning. Feel it, the way the night holds you captive. The creature stood motionless, facing the woods, its back to the neighbor's house, its side profile clear to me. It was no man, no animal. It was something else, something that didn't belong in my world. My mind scrambled for answers. A prank, a statue, a trick of exhaustion, but nothing fit. This was real. As real as the goosebumps prickling my arms, as real as the cold sweat beating on my forehead. What would you do, staring at something that defies everything you know? My thoughts flashed to a story my uncle told me when I was a kid sitting by a campfire in these same woods, his voice low, his eyes haunted. Listen to his story. Let it pull you deeper. He'd been hunting here long before the neighborhood was built, when he felt eyes on him, heard footsteps that stopped when he did. He'd seen a shape, tall, pale, gone when he turned his flashlight. He never went back, and the way his hands shook told me he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. I'd thought it was just a story, a tale to scare kids, but now, staring at that creature, I felt his fear in my own bones. The woods behind the creature seemed to pulse, their darkness alive with whispers I couldn't hear. Let yourself feel that pulse, the way it draws you in. I'd grown up hearing tales about these woods passed down by old-timers at the gas station where I worked. They spoke of hunters who vanished, hikers who felt watched, kids who saw shapes, moving just beyond the trees. One story, told by an old man named Amos, haunted me. Hear his voice, rough with years, heavy with truth. He'd been a boy when his father found tracks in these woods, too big, too smooth, leading nowhere. The elders burned sage at their doorsteps, whispered prayers to keep it away, whatever it was. They called the woods a thin place, where the veil between worlds was fragile, where things slipped through. Amos said his grandfather saw something once, a pale figure watching from the trees, gone when he blinked. The town had rituals, sage, crosses, salt at thresholds to keep the woods at bay. I'd laughed it off as superstition, but now, staring at that glowing figure, I felt the weight of their warnings, and then it moved. Brace yourself. This is where reality cracks. The creature snapped its head toward me, its movement so sudden, so precise it felt like a blade cutting through the night. No eyes, no face, just that smooth, glowing surface, and yet I felt its gaze heavy and piercing, stripping away every ounce of courage I had left. You're there with me, aren't you? Feeling that stare, knowing it sees you. My heart slammed. Against my ribs, my legs screamed to run, but I was frozen, trapped in a moment where fear became a living thing. Time stretched, seconds feeling like hours, and in that endless instant I saw it clearer. Its skin like polished bone, its form both powerful and wrong, a mockery of everything human. My mind screamed one word: run. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the icy grass, and bolted for the door. The dogs raced in behind me, their whimpers echoing my panic. I threw the door shut, my hands fumbling with the lock, my back pressed against the wood as if I could hold the night at bay. Feel that panic, the way it chokes your breath. I waited, heart pounding, expecting something to crash through, to tear the house apart, to come for me. But nothing did. The silence was worse, heavy and mocking, as if the creature knew I was trapped in my own fear. I didn't sleep that night. Picture yourself there, lights blazing, afraid to look outside. I kept the curtains drawn, the dogs pressed against my legs, my phone clutched like a lifeline. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion, a reflection from my truck's headlights, but I knew better. That thing was real as the terror still coursing through me. Its image was burned into my mind. 6 to 7 feet tall, pale as death, smooth as glass, standing at the edge of the woods like it belonged there, like it was waiting for something, or someone. Let that image haunt you. Let it linger. I thought of the woods, their endless darkness, their secrets. I remembered another story from a coworker named Jake who'd grown up in Akron. Listened to his story, another layer of dread. He'd been driving home late years ago when he saw a figure on the roadside, tall, pale, standing upright when he slowed down. He'd thought it was a deer until it moved, its form too human, too wrong. He left town not long after, said the woods felt alive watching him. I hadn't believed him then, but now I understood. The next day I knocked on my neighbor Clara's door, my voice shaky as I asked if she'd seen anything strange. Hear her voice, trembling but sure. She hesitated, then told me about a night, years ago, when she'd woken to a glow outside her window, a pale light moving through her yard toward the woods. She'd locked her doors, prayed until dawn, and never looked out at night again. She said the woods had always been wrong. That, her grandfather warned her as a child to stay away, to never cross the tree line after dark. His own brother had gone missing there in the 50s, leaving only a single boot behind, found near the river that cut through the forest. Clara burned sage now, kept a cross above her door, and told me to do the same. I didn't laugh. I bought sage that week, sprinkled salt along my windowsills, and started praying for the first time since I was a kid. The woods had a history, I learned, piecing together fragments from locals at the gas station. Let their stories pull you deeper into the dark. A hunter in the 70s had vanished. His rifle found leaning against a tree, his tracks stopping abruptly. A group of teens in the 90s swore they saw a pale figure watching them from the woods, their campfire dying the moment it appeared. The elders spoke of a watcher, a thing that lived in the forest, drawn to those who strayed too close. They said it didn't always show itself, but when it did, it marked you, followed you, waited for you to look again. I started asking around, desperate for answers, and found others who'd felt it, the prickle on their necks, the sense of being watched. A cashier named Ellen told me her son saw something in the woods last year, a tall shape that glowed faintly, gone when he ran. Feel the weight of these stories piling up like stones. She'd moved her family to the other side of town, but her son still woke screaming, saying it was watching him. I never saw the creature again, but its presence lingered. You know that feeling, don't you? The prickle on your neck, the sense you're being watched. I stopped letting the dogs out after dark, kept the curtains closed, the lights on. My life shrank, confined to the safety of my house. But the fear stayed, a quiet ache in my chest. Some nights, when the air was too still, I'd hear something, a rustle, a shift, a sound that wasn't wind or animal. I'd feel that pull again, that whisper to look toward the woods. What if it's still there, waiting for you to look again? I searched online, desperate for answers, finding sketches of creatures from movies, Prometheus, The Thing, but none matched. They were too defined, too monstrous. What I'd seen was other, a violation of reality itself. I told a friend, Mark, expecting him to laugh, but he didn't. Listen to his story, it's another thread in the web. His dad had seen something in the 80s. A pale figure crossing the road near the woods, gone when he stopped his car. Mark said his dad never drove that road again. The fear changed me. Feel how it changes you too. I used to love the quiet of Akron, the way the night felt like a blanket. Now it feels like a trap. I dream of that creature, its glowing form standing at the edge of my yard, its eyeless gaze pulling me toward the dark. I wake sweating, checking the locks, counting. The dogs. Last week I felt it again, that pull stronger than ever as I stood on the porch. I didn't look, but I heard it. A low hum, not human, not animal, coming from the woods. I ran inside, my heart racing, and haven't gone out at night since. Step too close and you might not come back. I still live in that house, but the woods are no longer just trees. They're a boundary, a line I don't cross. The creature is still out there, I know it, waiting, watching, its pale form glowing just beyond the fence, just beyond my courage. And sometimes, in the silence, I wonder if it's already marked me, if it's only a matter of time before it comes closer. The house was alive, its silence a predator lying in wait, watching me with eyes I couldn't see. At 16, I was lost in the pixelated caves of Minecraft, my Xbox 360 humming softly in the dim living room. The tutorial map was my refuge, a place where I could dig through stone and build towers to keep the dark at bay. The night was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that clings to your skin, making every creak of the floorboards feel like a warning. My parents slept upstairs, my younger brother tucked away in his room, leaving me alone with the glow of the TV, its light casting jagged shadows across the walls. I was safe, or so I thought, my fingers moving across the controller, carving out a world where I was in control. But that night something stirred, a presence that slithered through the air, turning the familiar into a trap I couldn't escape. I was deep in a virtual cave, placing torches to push back the darkness, when a cry tore through the house, sharp and raw like a wound ripped open in the silence. It came from my parents' room, a sound so human it froze my blood. My controller slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor as I bolted upright, my heart hammering. I called out to my brother, my voice trembling, asking what had happened. He appeared in the doorway, his face pale as moonlight, his eyes wide, with a fear I'd never seen in him before. "The doll," he whispered, his voice barely audible, pointing toward the glass case in the corner of their room. It moved. I laughed, a nervous reflex, thinking he was playing a prank, but his expression didn't waver. We crept toward the case together, the hardwood cold under my bare feet, the air thick with a sour metallic tang that coated my throat. The Mexican doll sat there, its painted smile frozen, its black eyes glinting under the dim lamp. But something was wrong. Its head was tilted just slightly, the angle unnatural, as if it had turned to watch us. I stared, my breath catching, certain it had been straight before. My brother swore it had shifted, his voice shaking with conviction, and that certainty planted a seed of doubt in my chest, one that grew with every second I met those lifeless eyes. I tried to shake it off, to bury the unease in the familiar rhythm of Minecraft. But the house felt different now, its silence heavier, its shadows sharper, as if they were waiting for me to look away. My aunt's voice echoed in my mind, a story she'd told years ago about a doll in her childhood home that moved at night, its glass case trembling as if it wanted to break free. She'd laughed it off, but her eyes had been distant, haunted, as if she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the screen, but the air grew colder, denser, pressing against me like a living thing. I felt it, a gaze heavy and deliberate, watching me from the corners of the room. I didn't dare turn around, my eyes fixed on the TV, but the shadows seemed to pulse, their edges curling like fingers reaching out. A week later, family arrived, and I was banished to a spare room, a small frigid space with a steep ladder leading to a makeshift attic bedroom. The room was always cold, no matter the season, its air heavy with a chill that sank into my bones. I climbed the ladder, my breath fogging in the dim light, and settled into the narrow bed surrounded by stacks of old suitcases. their leather cracked and dusty. The air felt alive, pressing against me, like it was waiting for me to close my eyes. The slanted ceiling loomed above, the shadows twisting into shapes that seemed to move when I blinked. I pulled the blanket tighter, my eyes tracing the ladder, the only way out. My cousin's story surfaced unbidden. A guest who'd stayed in this room and woken to find their belongings rearranged. Their shoes lined up like an offering at the foot of the bed. He'd laughed, but his voice had cracked, betraying the fear he tried to hide. I told myself it was just a story, but the cold tightened around me, the air growing heavier, as if the room was listening. I'd barely closed my eyes when it happened. The suitcases stacked neatly against the wall collapsed with a heavy thud, spilling across the floor. My heart stopped. They hadn't fallen toward me, but beside me, as if guided by an unseen hand. I froze, my breath shallow, my eyes locked on the ladder, expecting movement, expecting something to climb down. The shadows pulsed, the cold tightening like a vice, whispering that I wasn't alone. I waited, my body rigid, but the room was silent, the suitcases still, their contents scattered like a message I couldn't read. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, a memory from years ago. She'd stayed in this room as a child, waking to find her toys rearranged, her dolls facing the wall. She'd never spoken of it again, but her eyes had carried the weight of that night. I didn't sleep, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, the cold seeping deeper, the shadows watching. The next night I stayed in my own room, desperate for familiarity. I was an introvert, content to stay in while my family went out, the house mine, for a few hours. I was reading, the lamp casting a warm circle of light when I heard it. My name whispered softly like a breath against glass. I froze, my book slipping from my hands, my heart pounding. The sound came again, closer now, from the hallway, sharp and insistent, as if it knew I was listening. It was my name, unmistakable, curling through the air like smoke. I stood, my legs unsteady, and peered into the dark corridor, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The house was empty, the fridge humming faintly, the floorboards still. But the whisper came again, louder, closer, as if it was standing just behind me. I searched every room, my light sweeping the corners, but found no one. I called my parents, tears streaming down my face, my voice breaking as I tried to explain. They rushed home, their faces tight with worry. But the house was silent, the whisper gone, leaving only the echo of my fear. My mother later admitted she'd heard her name called as a child in a house far from here, a voice that followed her into dreams, never explained. I didn't ask for more, too afraid of what I'd hear. Weeks later, the final incident came. I was restless, pacing the living room, the moonlight spilling through the window in silver shards. I felt it before I saw it, a presence heavy and deliberate just beyond the glass. I turned, my breath catching, and there he was, a man, or the shape of a man, standing outside the window. His silhouette was sharp, too tall, too still, his face lost in shadow. I blinked, my heart hammering, and he was gone, the yard empty under the pale light. I ran outside, my flashlight sweeping the grass, but there was no trace, no footprints, nothing to prove he'd been there. Yet I knew what I'd seen, and the weight of his gaze lingered, a cold knot in my chest. My brother later confessed he'd seen something similar years before, a figure by the window gone in an instant, leaving only fear. He'd never told anyone, afraid they wouldn't believe him. The house never felt the same. The doll still sits in its case, its head tilted just slightly, as if waiting for me to look away. The attic room remains cold, the suitcases untouched but heavy with memory. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear my name, faint and distant, or feel the weight of unseen eyes. The house knows me and it's still watching, waiting for me to step back into its shadows. I moved out eventually, but the memories linger, a weight I can't shake. My mother's stories, my cousin's warnings, my brother's fear, they weave together, a tapestry of dread that binds me to that house. Every shadow feels like a reminder, every whisper a call I'm afraid to answer. In January 2022, my partner and I moved into a secluded finca near Rio Espe, Colombia, a place where the hills cradled the river like a secret. The house was old, its wooden beams groaning under the weight of years, its windows catching the mist that rolled off the water each dawn. Step into that house, feel the damp air clinging to your skin. We were starting over, drawn to the fertile quiet of the land, the promise of peace. My partner was 4 months pregnant, her belly just beginning to curve, and we carried our hope like a fragile flame, cautious but bright. Her mother, brother, and sister joined us for the first weeks, filling the house with warmth, their laughter a shield against the unfamiliar. The river hummed beyond the trees, its voice constant, soothing at first, but soon it felt like a whisper, low and insistent, calling to something deep within us. Listen to it, that hum, soft, but never silent. The finca stood alone, surrounded by coffee fields and dense forest, the nearest neighbor a mile away. At night, the world shrank to the glow of our lanterns, the rest swallowed by a darkness so thick it pressed against the windows. Picture that darkness, how it watches, waiting. We adjusted to the rhythms of the land, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of night birds, the river's endless song. But in our first week, something shifted. It was late, past midnight, when the house fell silent, the kind of quiet that feels too heavy, too deliberate. I was upstairs, half asleep beside my partner, when her mother stirred below, her voice trembling as she called up to us. Pause here. Feel the chill of her fear. She'd heard something, a woman's voice, faint but urgent, drifting from just beyond the house. "Help me," it said, soft and pained, human but not quite. My partner's brother and sister heard it too, their faces pale as they stood by the window, staring into the fog. We checked the doors, the locks, thinking someone was lost, hurt, wandering the hills. But the night was empty. No footprints, no lights, just the river's hum and the mist curling through the trees. It didn't come every night, but it came enough. Feel the dread building, night after night. By the second week, the voice had returned 3 times, always between midnight and 3 a.m., when the fog was thickest and the river's song grew louder. It wasn't a scream, wasn't loud. It was worse, a plea that burrowed into your heart, both desperate and dangerous. You hear it too, don't you, that cry, pulling you closer? At first we thought it was my partner, her pregnancy making her restless, but she was always asleep, her breath steady beside me. We searched the property, flashlights cutting through the dark, but found nothing, no tracks, no signs of life. The voice faded each time, dissolving into the mist like a dream you couldn't hold. My partner's mother began to pray, her rosary beads clicking softly, her eyes darting to the windows. Her brother paced, muttering about leaving, while her sister clutched a blanket, refusing to sleep alone. I tried to stay calm, to be the anchor, but the voice haunted me, its echo lingering in the quiet moments, making the house feel less like a home and more like a trap. Then came the night that broke us. Brace yourself. This is where the world tilts. It was our second week, the air heavy with fog, the river's hum almost a roar. My partner woke gasping, her hands clutching her belly, pain twisting her face. Feel her fear, the way it grips your heart. The cramps came sudden and sharp, like contractions, far too early for labor. We were upstairs, focused on her, my hands trembling as I tried to soothe her, to keep her breathing steady. In our panic, we'd left our phones downstairs, forgotten in the rush of fear. The pain ebbed and flowed, each wave stealing her breath, and I felt helpless, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By morning, the pain had eased, leaving us exhausted but relieved, clinging to each other in the pale dawn light. Picture that relief, fragile, fleeting. But when we spoke to the security guard at the residential gate, our relief shattered. He asked, his voice low, what had happened the night before. We said nothing, confused. He told us an ambulance had come at 1 a.m., lights flashing, insisting someone from our property had called, reporting a woman in distress. Freeze here. Let the truth sink in. We hadn't called. No one in the house had. Yet the ambulance arrived, knocking at the gate, and when no one answered, they left, puzzled. That same night, my partner's family had heard the voice again, closer this time, almost under the window, whispering, "Help me." We were stunned, the house suddenly foreign, its walls no longer safe. Feel the betrayal, the way it shifts your world. We started asking around, neighbors, guards, elders in the nearby town. Their answers came slowly, reluctantly, as if speaking it aloud gave it power. They told us about La Llorona, the weeping woman, a spirit born of grief forever, searching for her lost children. Listen to their stories, let them pull you deeper. Here, near the river, she was more than a legend. She was a force, drawn to pregnant women, to crying children, to pain like blood in the water. The elders spoke of her cry, soft and human, luring, the kind-hearted to open their doors to let her in. But in this town, the stories went darker. La Llorona had changed, they said, learned to weave herself into the modern world. Picture her, not just a ghost, but something more. Phones rang with no one on the line, only weeping. Baby monitors caught whispers when no one was near. Emergency services received calls from empty homes, cries for help that led to nothing. Ambulances arrived unbidden, like ours, responding to voices no human made. Some believed she was no longer just a spirit, but a pattern, a force that clung to sorrow and technology, slipping through the cracks of our world to reach those she wanted. One elder, Maria, told us a story that chilled me. Hear her voice, worn but steady, heavy with memory. Decades ago, her sister, pregnant like my partner, had lived near the river. She'd heard the cry, night after night, growing closer. One night, she opened the door, thinking someone needed help. The next day, she lost her child, her screams echoing through the village. Maria said La Llorona didn't just take, she marked you. Her presence a stain you couldn't wash away. Feel that stain, the way it lingers. Maria warned us, never answer the cry, never open the door, or you give her permission to enter. We hadn't answered that night, thank God, but I believed she'd tried. The ambulance, the voice, the pain, they were her, testing our defenses, seeking a way in. Our daughter was born 6 weeks ago, healthy, her tiny breaths a miracle. Picture her, so small, so vulnerable, but La Llorona hasn't left. You feel her too, don't you? Just beyond the light. Some nights, when the fog rolls in and the river hums louder, I hear it. A faint cry, not quite human, drifting through the mist. My partner clutches our daughter closer, her eyes wide, searching the dark. We keep the doors locked, the windows sealed, sage burning at the threshold. We've planned to move, to leave the river behind, but the process is slow and each night feels like a gamble. What if she's waiting just outside, patient as death? I spoke to a neighbor, Juan, who'd lived here all his life. Listen to his story, another thread in the web. He'd heard the cry as a boy, seen a figure in white by the river, her face blurred but her eyes sharp, watching him. His mother burned copal, prayed for days, and they never opened the door. Juan said the river was her domain, that she'd always be there waiting for someone to answer. The fear has changed us. Feel how it changes you, too. The finca, once a haven, is now a cage. We don't sleep deeply, our ears tuned to every sound, the river, the wind, the cry that might come. I dream of her, a woman in white, her hands reaching for our daughter, her voice both sorrowful and hungry. I wake checking the locks, counting breaths, praying the sage holds. Last night the baby monitor hummed, a low static buzz, and for a moment I thought I heard a whisper. Help me. Step too close and you might not come back. We're leaving soon, but until then, we live with her shadow, knowing she's out there, weaving through the mist, waiting for us to falter. And I wonder in the silence if she's already inside, her cry echoing in our hearts, her presence a mark we'll never escape. The forest was a living thing, its shadows curling like fingers clawing at the edges of my sanity, waiting to drag me into a darkness that knew my name. I lived 4 miles from Lake Lanier, a place steeped in whispers, its still waters said to cradle secrets older than the gnarled pines that stood sentinel along its shores. At 20, I thought I knew those woods, their winding trails carved into my memory from countless nights spent slipping through the trees, the haze of weed softening the world's sharp edges. The forest was my sanctuary, a labyrinth of damp earth, and towering trunks where I could breathe, could forget the weight of the day. But that summer the woods turned on me, their air thick with a presence that watched, waited, and refused to let me go. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was a predator, and I was its prey. I'd always felt it, that faint prickle on the back of my neck when I ventured too deep, as if the trees themselves were leaning closer, their branches whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. The woods were never truly quiet. Crickets hummed, frogs croaked, leaves rustled in the faint breeze, but sometimes they went still, the kind of stillness that makes your heart stutter, your breath catch in your throat. The birds stopped singing, the insects fell silent, and the trees seemed to hold their breath as if something ancient was passing through, its presence a weight that pressed against my chest. I'd light my joint, the smoke curling upward, blending with the mist that clung to the undergrowth like a shroud, its tendrils wrapping around my ankles. But the air would shift, growing heavy, oppressive, squeezing the breath from my lungs until I could barely move. It wasn't the weed. I'd felt it sober, in broad daylight, a sense of being watched, of being unwanted, as if the forest itself was telling me to leave. I'd run those days, my sneakers pounding the dirt, my pulse racing as the trees' gaze burned into my back, their branches seeming to reach out, brushing my shoulders with cold, deliberate fingers. My neighbor, an old man with eyes like clouded glass, once told me a story about a hunter who'd vanished in these woods decades ago. His rifle was found leaning against a pine, his tracks ending abruptly in a clearing as if he'd been plucked from the earth by something unseen. His name was John, and they never found him, only his hat, tangled in the roots of a tree, as if the forest had claimed it as a trophy. I'd laughed it off, chalking it up to campfire tales, but now that story clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake, whispering that the woods held secrets I wasn't ready to know. I tried to push it away, to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of the trails, but the air grew heavier each time I returned, the forest's pulse quickening, as if it was learning me, memorizing my steps. One night, my brother and his friend ventured to a secluded ledge by the river, a muddy dip hidden off a narrow trail, where the trees leaned close and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. It was past midnight, The sky a heavy black, the forest humming with its usual chorus of night sounds. They sat on the ledge, passing a joint, their laughter cutting through the quiet, their flashlights casting weak beams into the dark, illuminating patches of moss and twisted roots. Then the footsteps came, heavy and deliberate, circling just beyond the trees, each step a hammer against their nerves. They froze, their voices dying, the air growing thick with that same oppressive weight I'd felt before. My brother whispered, "It's probably a deer," his voice unsteady, clinging to reason like a lifeline. But the steps didn't falter, didn't scatter like an animal's would. They stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. A void that swallowed every sound, leaving only the thud of their hearts echoing in their chests. They turned, their flashlights trembling, and there it was. A shadow, towering 9 feet tall, its form humanoid but wrong, its edges too sharp, its eyes glowing white like twin moons in the black. It stared down at them, unblinking, its gaze a blade that sliced through their courage, pinning them to the earth. They didn't speak, didn't look at each other. They scrambled up the muddy slope, their breaths ragged, slipping in the wet earth as they ran, their flashlights bouncing wildly, the forest's weight chasing them to their car. They drove in silence, the rearview mirror reflecting only darkness, but they felt it still, that gaze, heavy and unyielding, following them through the night. I didn't believe them at first. My brother wasn't one for stories, his usual bravado, replaced by a quiet that unsettled me. He sat on the couch, his hands shaking as he recounted what they'd seen, his eyes haunted, darting to the windows as if expecting those white eyes to peer through. I'd felt that presence myself, that oppressive weight, but seeing it was different, a violation of everything I thought I knew. I tried to laugh it off, to call it a trick of the dark, but his fear was real, contagious, sinking into my bones like the cold of the forest itself. My father's voice echoed in my mind, a memory from years ago. He'd gone into those woods once, hunting with friends, and heard footsteps that didn't belong circling their camp until dawn. He'd never gone back, his face pale when he spoke of it, his eyes carrying a fear he couldn't name. I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, a thread weaving through my own unease. Days later, I went to that ledge, curiosity overriding the fear that gnawed at my gut. The air was heavier than I remembered, the trees looming closer, their branches knitting together like a cage. I stood there, the river's murmur faint, the mist curling around my ankles like a living thing. The forest was silent, too silent, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. Then I heard it, a sound like a chainsaw, organic and raw, mixed with a high-pitched cry that pierced my skull, echoing through the trees like a warning. It wasn't a bird, wasn't anything I'd heard before, not in all my years in these woods. My bag, with my keys inside, lay forgotten on the ground. I grabbed it, my hands shaking, and ran, the sound following me, growing louder, closer, as if it was hunting me, its rhythm matching my pounding heart. My brother, waiting in the car 1,500 feet away, heard it too, his face pale as I dove inside, slamming the door. We didn't speak, just drove, the forest's gaze burning through the rearview mirror, its presence a weight that clung to us long after we left the trees behind. My father later admitted he'd heard something similar years ago, a sound that drove him from the woods, never to return. He'd kept it secret, but the fear in his eyes mirrored my own, a shared dread that bound us to this place. Weeks later, my brother and his friend saw it again, this time on a narrow road cutting through the woods. Their floodlights swept the trees, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the dark. Then they saw it, a humanoid shape, 9 feet tall, peering from behind a pine, its eyes glinting like shards of glass in the night. It didn't move, just watched. Its presence a weight that pressed against the car, making the air inside feel thin, suffocating. They kept driving, their hands trembling on the wheel, the road stretching endlessly before them, the forest's gaze never wavering. My brother had built a fort in those woods, a crude barrier of logs and wire, a place he called safe. He'd spent hours there, hammering stakes into the earth, weaving wire through the gaps, as if he could keep the forest out. That night he stood at the fence, his voice loud, reckless, challenging whatever was out there to cross it. We begged him to stop, our voices sharp with fear, knowing he was tempting something we couldn't fight. The air grew colder, the trees seeming to lean closer, their branches heavy with an unseen weight. I felt it again, that gaze unyielding, waiting for us to make a mistake, its presence a promise that the forest wasn't done with us. My grandfather's voice crept into my thoughts, a story he'd told me as a child about a trapper who'd seen eyes in these woods glowing like lanterns watching him from the trees. He'd fled, never to return, but the eyes followed him, haunting his sleep until he left the town for good. I hadn't believed him then, but now, I felt those eyes, their gaze a weight I couldn't shake, a promise that the forest knew me. I avoid that trail now, sticking to the open roads, but the weight follows me, a shadow that lingers at the edge of my vision, slipping into my dreams. My brother still talks about the fort, about going back, but I see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I carry. The woods know us and they're waiting, their shadows curling like fingers ready to pull us back into the dark. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, I hear that sound again, that organic roar mixed with a cry, echoing through my mind, pulling me back to the forest heart, where something ancient waits, its eyes glowing in the black, calling my name. The night was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like something's waiting just beyond your sight. In 2022, I lived in a small Ohio town where the streets emptied after dusk, leaving only shadows and the faint hum of distant lives. My boyfriend, Sam, and I had a ritual of walking our dogs late around midnight, when the world was still and the air carried a crisp autumn bite. Step into that darkness, feel its weight on your shoulders. Our dogs, Max and Bella, were reactive. Max, especially, a rescue with scars from a dog attack, his barks reserved for other canines that crossed his path. Late walks were our solution, a way to avoid the chaos of daytime, to claim the quiet streets for ourselves. Our path was unchanging, down the deserted main street, past the old church with its cracked steeple, through the graveyard where time seemed to pause, and into the gated park at the town's edge. Picture that graveyard, its headstones leaning, like tired sentinels guarding secrets etched in stone. The graveyard was ancient, its markers worn by centuries, some names faded into whispers under moss and lichen. I'd always felt a pull there, a need to linger, to read names like Margaret Cole, 1832-1889, and murmur, "Rest well," as if my words could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. I wasn't always so drawn to the dead. Let me take you back to a memory that shaped me. As a child, I'd visited my grandmother's grave with my mother, her hands trembling as she placed flowers on the stone. She'd told me stories of spirits, of souls who lingered when called, her voice low and serious. "Never speak to the dead unless you're ready for them to answer," she'd said, her eyes searching mine. I'd carried that warning, half forgotten, until I moved to this town, where the graveyard silence felt alive, its stones beckoning me to speak. Sam thought it was odd, my habit of greeting the graves, but he humored me, his teasing smile a comfort in the dark. That night, as we left at 12:45 a.m., the air was sharp, the sky a starless void, and I felt the graveyard's pull stronger than ever, its silence not empty but heavy, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. We crossed into the graveyard, Max and Bella tugging at their leashes, their breath fogging in the dim streetlight. Feel the cold the way it seeps into your bones. I paused at a headstone tracing the name, Eleanor Hayes, 1847 to 1892, my voice soft as I wished her peace. The air thickened, the silence deepening, and Bella whimpered, her ears twitching. I brushed it off, thinking she'd caught a scent. A fox, perhaps, or a stray cat? But Max was tense, his eyes darting, his body low. You sense it too, don't you? Something's not right. We moved on, leaving the graveyard for the park, a small field encircled by a 6-foot iron fence. Its bars, rusted but unyielding. Picture that fence, a frail shield against what lurks beyond. The park was where we'd let the dogs run, their paws thudding on the grass under the street lamp's pale glow. But as we walked down the long, dead road to the gate, the night shifted, the air growing heavier like a storm about to break. Pause here. Feel the prickle on your neck. At 1:15 a.m., we saw him, a man in a suit, standing under a street lamp, his figure sharp against the dark. He was humming, a low, tuneless melody that drifted on the wind, chilling me more than the cold. Hear it, that hum, wrong in its emptiness. In our small town, seeing anyone out this late was strange, let alone a man in a pristine suit. His face shadowed, his posture unnaturally still. Max froze, his body stiffening, a low whine rising in his throat. Feel his fear. It's yours now. Max only reacted like that to other dogs, his trauma making him wary but never to people. I glanced at Sam, his jaw tight, his hand gripping Bella's leash. We thought maybe Max had seen a fox, but his eyes were locked on the man, his whine turning to a stifled bark. You want to look closer, but something tells you not to. We kept walking, the hum fading behind us, but the unease clung. A weight I couldn't shake. I told myself he was just an eccentric, maybe from a late event, but the night felt wrong, its silence too deliberate. Then, as we neared the park's gate, I saw her, a woman in baggy clothes, walking toward us in the distance, her figure blurred under the street lamps. Freeze here, let the dread build. She moved slowly, her head tilted, and though I couldn't see her face, I felt her gaze, heavy and unyielding like a hand pressing on my chest. We entered the park, the iron gate creaking as we closed it and let the dogs off leash. Their paws thudding on the grass, but I hesitated, my eyes on the woman. She was closer now, walking just outside the fence, her form clearer, loose, shapeless clothes, her head still tilted, staring at us. See her, that unnatural focus, locked on you. I couldn't make out her features, but her presence was overwhelming, a force that made my skin crawl. Sam noticed too, his voice low as he said, "She's watching us." Feel his unease. It mirrors your own. We started across the field, toward the park's entrance, trying to focus on the dogs, on each other. I was talking about a childhood dream, something trivial to break the tension, when I glanced at Sam and saw her again, in the corner of my eye, standing outside the park, her face nearly pressed against the bars. Brace yourself. This is where it breaks. She was motionless, her body unnaturally still, her gaze piercing through the dark. My heart raced, my words faltering. I whispered, "She's staring at us, you know." Sam turned, his eyes widening, and said louder than he meant to, "What the hell?" Feel his shock, it's yours now. The moment he spoke, she moved, her body jerking in a fast, strange way, like a puppet cut from its strings. She turned and scuttled away, Her movements wrong, too quick, too jagged, vanishing into the shadows beyond the street lamps. We stood frozen, the dogs circling us, whining, their tails low. You're there, heart pounding, knowing something's wrong. We didn't speak, just leashed the dogs and headed home, our steps quick, our eyes darting to every shadow. The town felt different, its quiet no longer peaceful but menacing, as if it hid something just out of sight. Back home, we locked the doors, checked the windows, the dogs pressed close. Picture that house, a fragile sanctuary. I couldn't sleep, the man's hum and the woman's stare replaying in my mind. Let them haunt you, those images, burned into your thoughts. I'm spiritual, always have been, and I felt in my gut that those two weren't human. The man's suit too pristine for a small-town night, his hum too empty. The woman's gaze too intense, her movements too unnatural. I wondered if my words in the graveyard had stirred something, called something to us. My mother's warning echoed. Never speak to the dead unless you're ready for them to answer. Feel that warning, heavy as stone. The next day I visited Mrs. Carter, an elderly neighbor who'd lived here forever. Listen to her story, let it pull you deeper. Her hands trembled as I described the man and woman, her coffee mug clattering on the table. She told me about the graveyard's past, how it held more than the town's dead. In the 1920s, a traveling preacher in a suit was found dead among the headstones, his body untouched but his face frozen in terror. Locals said he'd been chasing spirits, trying to cleanse the graveyard, and something chased him back. The woman, Mrs. Carter said, sounded like a widow from the 50s who'd wandered the park after losing her family, her body found curled by the fence one winter. People still saw her, her eyes hollow, watching. Feel their presence, lingering, in her words. Mrs. Carter warned us to avoid the graveyard at night, to never speak to the dead again. She burned sage now, kept a cross by her door, and urged me to do the same. I dug deeper, visiting the library where Mr. Ellis, the librarian, showed me old clippings. See them, yellowed pages, heavy with truth. They spoke of strange sightings, figures. In the graveyard, lights by the park's fence, people feeling watched. One article described a dog like Max barking at nothing, its owner swearing it saw a man in a suit vanish into the air. The town had whispers of spirits tied to the graveyard, drawn to those who acknowledged them. My words, my rest well, had they been an invitation? You're wondering too, aren't you, what you might have called? I told Sam and he didn't laugh. He'd felt it. The wrongness of that night. The way the air had thickened. The dog's fear. He admitted he'd heard the hum later, faint, as we walked home, though he hadn't said anything then. The fear reshaped us. Feel how it reshapes you, too. We stopped walking at night, kept the dogs in the yard, their leashes short. The graveyard called to me, its silence louder, its stones heavier in my dreams. I saw the woman, her face pressed against the fence, her eyes black and endless. I heard the man's hum, low and relentless, following me through the house. Let those sounds haunt you, let them linger. Last week, Bella woke us, whining at the window, her eyes fixed on the dark. I didn't look, but I felt it, a presence, just outside, watching. We're moving soon, away from this town, this graveyard, this park. Step too close and you might not come back. But I know, deep in my soul, that they're still there, the man and the woman, waiting for someone else, to speak to the dead, to let them in. And sometimes in the quiet I hear that hum, faint but clear, calling me back to the shadows. The house was a relic, its walls breathing secrets that curled through the air, waiting to wrap around my soul. I stood on the sagging porch of a 2-story Victorian home, its gray clapboards peeling like old skin, its wraparound balcony groaning under the weight of decades. The windows gleamed like eyes, catching the fading light of dusk, watching me as I stepped across the threshold into a world that felt alive, its pulse hidden beneath layers of dust and shadow. I was visiting my best friend whose mother had rented this place, a gem from the 1860s. Its carved wood and stained glass a facade for something darker, something that stirred in the silence. At 22, I was used to crashing at their place, laughing over late-night movies, but that night the house felt different. Its air thick, its shadows too deep, as if it had been waiting for me to arrive, to claim me as its own. My friend led me inside, her excitement a bright spark in the dim foyer, where the air carried the scent of old wood, wax, and something faintly sour, like wilted flowers left too long in a vase. The burgundy carpet on the stairs was worn thin, each step sinking under my weight, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged hall like a heartbeat. She pulled me toward a closet, its door swinging open to reveal a hidden passage, a narrow hallway that snaked through the walls, its darkness swallowing the beam of my flashlight. I laughed, half thrilled, half unsettled as we traced the passage, cobwebs brushing my face like cold fingers, the cracked plaster walls seeming to pulse under my touch. The house was a labyrinth, its architecture a puzzle of locked doors and forgotten spaces, each one holding a piece of its past, a story it refused to share. My friend's eyes sparkled as she spoke of secret rooms and hidden staircases, but the air grew colder, the shadows shifting as if the house was listening, its pulse quickening with every step we took. I felt it then, a prickle on my neck, a sense that we weren't alone, that something was watching from the other side of the walls, its gaze heavy and deliberate. We ended the tour in the kitchen, where her mother poured coffee, her hands steady but her eyes distant, carrying a weight that made my chest tighten. She spoke softly, her voice weaving through the hum of the fridge, telling us about the house's strange habits. The office door, with only one entrance, locked itself from the inside, the key untouched, the room empty when she forced it open, the air inside thick with a chill that clung to her skin. Mornings brought stranger finds, her jewelry, her pill bottles, even a single earring she'd lost years ago, arranged in neat piles on her bedroom floor, as if placed by careful, unseen hands. I shifted in my seat, the warmth of the coffee, cup no match for the chill creeping up my spine. The kitchen suddenly too small, the shadows too close. Then she told us about the house's former owner, an elderly woman who'd lived here decades ago, her heart as cold as the walls that held her. She'd poisoned her housekeepers with white oleanders from the backyard, their petals soft but deadly, their scent lingering in the flower beds, a silent testament to her cruelty. The story sank into me like a stone, the words heavy, the air growing denser as if the house itself was nodding, confirming its own dark history. My friend's mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, as if she knew the house was more than brick and wood, as if she felt its gaze too. I tried to bury the unease in the night's routine. Dinner, laughter, the glow of a movie flickering on the TV. But the house wouldn't let me forget. My friend's old room was taken by her sister, so I was offered the couch in the living room, a sprawling space with high ceilings and tall windows that let in slivers of moonlight, their edges sharp against the dark. I settled in, but the air felt wrong, heavy with a presence that pressed against my chest, watching me from the corners of the room. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the TV, which I left on, its flickering light a fragile shield against the shadows that pooled in the burgundy carpet, their edges curling like smoke. I pulled the blanket tighter, my eyes fixed on the screen, but the air grew colder, denser, pressing against me like a living thing. My grandmother's voice surfaced, a memory from childhood. She'd stayed in a house like this once, waking, to find her shoes moved, her mirror fogged with breath that wasn't hers, her reflection distorted by something she couldn't name. I pushed the thought away, but the unease grew, the room shrinking, the walls leaning closer as if they wanted to swallow me whole. Sleep was impossible. I turned to face the back of the couch, hoping to block out the dark, but the feeling of being watched never left, a weight that settled in my bones, cold and unyielding. I tried to focus on the TV, its commercials a distant hum, but the shadows seemed to move, their edges sharp, reaching for me with a quiet hunger. Then it happened, a shift like the air itself had torn open, pulling me out of my body, out of time. I was standing beside the couch, looking down at myself, my sleeping form curled under the blanket, the TV's light flashing across my face, painting my skin in shades of blue and gray. The details were impossibly clear. The flicker of a late night ad, the faint hum of the fridge, the way my chest rose and fell slow and steady. I couldn't look away, my consciousness hovering, trapped in a space between dream and reality, a prisoner in the house's gaze. The room felt alive, its shadows pulsing, their edges sharp as if they were reaching for me, their touch cold and deliberate. I tried to move, to scream, but I was weightless, a ghost in my own body, watching as the house watched me, its presence a weight that pressed against my soul, heavy with intent. A story my friend once told me flickered in my mind. Her cousin had slept here, waking to find his reflection in the window, but the face wasn't his, its eyes too wide, its smile too sharp. He'd run, but the house followed him, its whispers slipping into his dreams, calling him back, a siren song he couldn't resist. I wanted to run too, but I was tethered, my gaze locked on my sleeping self, as if something was holding me there, guarding me, or claiming me. The night stretched on, endless, the TV's light the only anchor in a sea of shadows that seemed to breathe, to move, to know me. The house was alive, its walls a skin, its shadows a pulse, and I was inside it, a heartbeat it could stop at any moment. My aunt's voice crept into my thoughts, a story she'd told me as a child about a house she'd lived in, where the mirrors showed faces that weren't there, where the air grew heavy at night, watching her sleep. She'd left, but the house never left her, its memory a weight she carried always, a shadow that slipped into her quiet moments. I don't know when I returned to my body, but when I woke, my limbs were heavy, my eyes burning, as if I hadn't slept at all. The room was unchanged, the TV still on, its light pale and weak against the dawn creeping through the windows. But the air was different, charged with a quiet menace, a promise that the house had touched me, its mark a stain I couldn't wash away. I packed my bag, my hands shaking, my breath shallow as I moved through the house, its walls seeming to lean closer, their whispers brushing my ears like cold breath. The staircase felt longer, the foyer darker, the oleanders in the backyard swaying gently, their petals gleaming like teeth in the morning light. I left as soon as the sun rose, the house's gaze burning into my back as I stepped into the world outside, the air clean but not enough to wash away the weight I carried. My friend's mother moved out soon after, driven away by the same unease, confirmed by a spiritual medium who spoke of a presence that clung to the walls, fed by the oleander's poison. Its hunger never sated. The medium had seen her, the old woman, her eyes black as the shadows, her hands stained with petal dust, watching from the secret passages. I never went back, but the house follows me, its shadows slipping into my dreams, its whispers echoing in the quiet of the night. My mother once told me about a house she'd visited as a girl, where the doors opened on their own, where the air grew heavy with a presence that knew her name. She'd fled, but the house stayed with her, its memory a weight she carried, a shadow that lingered in her eyes. I feel that weight now. The Victorian's gaze a constant shadow, its presence a reminder that some doors once opened can never be closed. Sometimes I feel it again, that shift, that gaze, watching me from the dark, waiting for me to step back into its walls, to become part of its story forever. The oleanders bloom in my dreams, their scent sharp and sweet, their petals falling like snow. And I see her, the old woman, her smile a blade, her eyes a promise that the house will never let me go. The moment you realize the danger isn't lurking outside, it's already inside. It's cold metal pressed against your life. In 2019, I was scraping by in a triplex apartment in a forgotten corner of town, where the streets smelled of oil and asphalt and the streetlights flickered like they were giving up. My roommate Mike was my anchor, a guy whose laugh could cut through any gloom, though trouble seemed to follow him like a shadow. Step into that apartment, feel its worn walls pressing close. We'd been roommates for over a year. Our lives, a tangle of late-night Xbox sessions, greasy pizza boxes, and the kind of bond forged in shared struggle. The triplex was a dive, peeling paint, creaky floors, neighbors upstairs who fought loud enough to shake the ceiling. Picture the chaos, the way it wears you down. When Jake, a mutual friend, started crashing with us, the tension grew. 3 egos clashing in a space too small. Jake's offer to move into his mom's old trailer with him and his friend Willard felt like salvation, a chance to breathe again. I jumped at it. And in June 2020, Jake and I left, parting with Mike on good terms, promising to keep the brotherhood alive. The trailer was a quiet haven, nestled in a field where the grass grew, wild and the night was soft with cricket songs. Feel that peace, fragile but sweet. I settled into a new rhythm, gaming with Jake, Willard, and our friend Dan, the old apartment's stress fading like a bruise. But one night, mid-smite match, my Xbox lit up with a message from Mike that froze my blood. Pause here. Feel the dread clawing at your chest. Guess who just broke into the house and held me at gunpoint, it read, the words sharp against the screen's glow. My heart stopped, my fingers hovering over the controller, my mind flooding with images of Mike, crumpled, hurt, gone. You're there with me, aren't you? Feeling that panic, that void. I typed back asking who, my breath shallow, dreading the answer. His reply hit like a blow. Upstairs, neighbors stole my phone, wallet, and weed. I asked if he was okay, if he needed us or the cops. His next message was surreal. Have like 6 cop cars outside, just got back from giving my statement. Could use some company. I told Jake, Willard, and Dan, my voice breaking, and we piled into my car, the summer night thick with heat and fear. Picture that drive, the dark rushing past, your pulse racing. The triplex was 15 minutes away, but each second stretched. My mind replaying our time there, Mike's jokes, our fights, the nights we'd felt untouchable. The neighborhood had always been rough, its cracked sidewalks hiding a quiet menace, its alleys whispering of trouble. I'd heard stories from locals, tales of break-ins, of a man named Carl who'd lived in our unit years ago. Listen to his story, let it pull you deeper. Carl was a dealer like Mike, but harder, his apartment a magnet for chaos. One night, robbers came, leaving him dead, his throat cut, his blood soaking the floor. The cops never solved it, and some said his ghost lingered, a warning in the walls. I'd scoffed at the tale, but now, racing toward Mike, I felt Carl's shadow, a reminder of how close danger always was. We pulled up to the triplex, its facade lit by flashing red and blue lights. 6 cop cars parked like a barricade, their radios crackling in the night. See it, the chaos swallowing the quiet. Mike was inside, slumped on the couch, his face pale, his hands trembling around a glass of water. He was unhurt, but his eyes were hollow, his usual spark gone. Feel his fear, it's raw, heavy. The cops had taken his paraphernalia, routine, for them, and couldn't find his phone. A loss that stung but meant nothing next to his life. We gathered around him, our voices low, asking what happened. Mike's story spilled out, jagged and raw, each word a weight I'd carry forever. Brace yourself. This is where it cuts deep. That afternoon, Mike had been alone, the apartment still, except for the AC's hum. A knock came, sharp and demanding, the kind that sets your nerves on edge. You hear it too, don't you? That sound, sharp and wrong. It was the upstairs neighbors. 2 kids, 16, maybe 17, lean, twitchy, their faces hard with need. They asked if he had weed to sell, their voices casual but edged with hunger. Mike said no, he'd get some later, trying to keep it light. They left, annoyed, their footsteps heavy on the stairs. Feel his unease, the way it settles in. Hours. Later they knocked again, louder, asking if he'd picked up. Mike said no, his patience fraying, and they walked away, their eyes cold, promising trouble. He was irritated, texting his dealer, hoping they'd find another source. By nightfall, he thought they'd given up. The apartment quiet again. You want to believe it's over, but you know it's not. Then came the third knock, late, when the world was asleep. Freeze here, feel your heart lurch. Mike hesitated, his gut screaming to ignore it, but he thought it might be a friend. That was his mistake, the kind that changes everything. He opened the door and the kids were there, their faces twisted with rage, their eyes glinting with something feral. See them, their anger, their hunger. They didn't ask, they shoved in, slamming Mike to the floor, one pulling a gun, its barrel cold against his skull. Feel that metal, its weight, its threat. They demanded weed, money, anything, their voices sharp, desperate. Mike swore he had nothing, no cash, no stash, but they didn't believe him. One kept the gun pressed to his head, the other tore through the apartment, flipping cushions, dumping drawers, the chaos deafening in the small space. Hear it, the destruction, the way it drowns hope. Mike stayed still, his heart hammering, his mind racing for escape. When he tried to plead, the gun pressed harder, the kid's voice hissing, "Shut up or you're dead." They found his phone, wallet, a small bag of weed, and took it, their hands quick, their eyes wild. Feel their greed. It chokes the air. They warned him not to move, not to follow, or they'd shoot. Mike lay there, the floor cold against his cheek, counting seconds that stretched like hours. When he was sure they were gone, he crawled to the back window, his hands shaking as he pushed it open, the night air a shock against his skin. Picture that escape, the desperation, the lifeline. He climbed out, ran to a neighbor's, and called 911, his voice breaking as he told them what happened. The cops swarmed the triplex, their flashlights slicing the dark. See them, their cold efficiency, their power. And then, the part that still burns. You won't believe this. It's maddening. The kids didn't run. They went back upstairs to their own apartment as if Mike wouldn't point them out, as if they were invincible. Feel their arrogance, it's infuriating. The police arrested them in minutes, the stolen goods still in their pockets. Mike got his wallet back, but his phone was gone, a small price for survival. He sat there telling us this, his voice hollow, his eyes somewhere else. You're with him, feeling that violation, that betrayal. I couldn't fathom it, opening your door, expecting safety, only to find death staring back. I thought of the nights I'd ignored the neighbors' noise, their fights, never imagining they'd turn on us. Weeks later, Mike told me something that deepened the scar. Listen close, this is the shadow that lingers. He'd been having nightmares, waking in a sweat, seeing the gun, feeling its cold weight. But one dream was worse. He saw the kids, not as they were, but older, their faces blurred, standing in his new room watching him sleep. Feel that chill? It's not just a dream. He'd wake, check the locks, unable to shake the sense they were still out there, waiting. I felt it too, a guilt that gnawed at me for leaving him, for not seeing the danger in those kids. You'd feel it too, wouldn't you? That weight of what could have been. I spoke to our landlord, Tony, a man worn by years in that building. Hear his story, it's heavy with truth. He said the triplex was cursed, its history a litany of trouble. Break-ins, fights, blood. A tenant in the 90s was beaten, left broken. A woman in our unit felt watched, fled after weeks. Tony wasn't shocked about Mike, just resigned, and he evicted the neighbor's family. Feel that curse? It clings like damp. I asked around, hearing more. Stories of theft, shadows in the stairwell. A dealer like Carl, dead in our apartment, his ghost a whisper in the walls. The triplex wasn't a home, it was a trap, drawing in the desperate, the violent. Mike moved, out to a house with friends, better locks, more light. Picture him rebuilding step by step. I visited, saw his smile return, but his eyes stayed guarded, always waiting for the next threat. I was grateful he'd survived, grateful I'd left, but the fear lingered, a shadow in my thoughts. I locked my doors twice, checked windows, kept a bat by my bed. You'd do the same, after knowing how close it was. The trailer felt safer, but nowhere felt safe, not truly. I dreamed of that gun, of Mike's face on the floor, of hands tearing through my life. Let those dreams haunt you, let them stay. Last month I drove by the triplex, its windows dark, its walls sagging. See it, a husk, alive with memory. It felt like it was watching, holding the echo of that night, of Carl's blood, of every betrayal. I don't know where those kids are. Prison, free, gone. But I hope they're far from us. Step too close and you might not walk away. I live differently now. My trust fragile, my world smaller. And sometimes, in the silence, I hear that knock, faint but real, reminding me how fast safety can shatter, how close danger always waits. The air was heavy with the truth I wasn't ready to face, as if the world itself was whispering that I'd seen things no one else could, things that marked me forever. I was 5, maybe 6, when it began. My childhood a patchwork of small-town days, endless summers and quiet moments where the world felt bigger than I could hold. I was a solitary kid, content to wander alone, my imagination painting stories in the empty spaces where friends were scarce. But what I saw wasn't born of daydreams, not the way adults tried to explain it away with gentle smiles and quick dismissals. Those memories are sharp, etched into my bones, and even now at 25 I stand at a crossroads, wondering if I was touched by spirits or if my mind wove ghosts from shadows, a betrayal I can't untangle. I need you to listen, to step into those moments, to feel the weight of a child's eyes seeing what shouldn't be seen, and decide for yourself what was real. It started on a warm evening, the kind where the sky burned orange and gold, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and the promise of distant rain. My family and another were gathered for dinner at a friend's house, the adults' laughter spilling from the open windows as they lingered over glasses of wine. They sent us kids, me, my younger brother, and a few others, to the grassy patch across the road, a familiar spot beside the train tracks, fenced off but close enough to feel the ground tremble under passing trains. We sprawled on a bench, watching a freight train thunder by, its wheels a steady pulse against the earth, its cars a blur of rust and graffiti. As the last car vanished, she was there, standing on the tracks, a girl my age, her dress pale and tattered, her eyes fixed on me with a knowing that stopped my heart. I froze, my breath catching, the world narrowing to her silhouette against the fading light. She was real, solid, her dark hair catching the breeze, but something was wrong. Her feet hovered just above the ground, her presence a weight that pressed against my chest, cold and unyielding. I blinked, my hands gripping the bench, and she was gone, the tracks empty, the air still. My brother didn't see her, his chatter about the train unbroken, but I felt her, a lingering chill that clung to my skin as we walked home, the sunset bleeding into dusk. Days later, I saw her again, this time at school, standing across the playground. Maybe 300 meters from those tracks, her figure faint against the chain-link fence. She was there, watching me, her eyes dark and knowing, as if she'd followed me, as if she knew my name and every secret I'd ever kept. I stared, my hands gripping the swing's chains, the other kids' shouts fading into a distant hum, the world tilting under her gaze. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her presence was a pull, a thread tying me to her, tugging at something deep inside. I looked away, my heart pounding, the swing's motion jarring, and when I glanced back, she was gone. The playground bright and ordinary, the air warm with the laughter of children. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, a daydream, spun from boredom. But she came to my house next, standing in my backyard, her figure faint against the dusk, her dress catching the wind like a ghost's breath. I couldn't look away, her gaze a hook in my soul, drawing me closer to a truth I didn't understand, a truth that scared me more than the dark. My mother's voice broke the spell, calling me inside for dinner, but the girl's shadow lingered, a stain on the edges of my vision, her presence a whisper in the quiet of my room. We started talking, or maybe she started talking to me. Her visits growing frequent, her figure appearing in the corners of my life. Her name began with an S or a T, Sarah maybe, or Tessa. She wasn't sure, her voice soft like a breeze rustling through leaves, her words carrying a sadness that made my chest ache. She told me she'd died on those tracks, playing with her twin sister during the station's grand opening, their laughter drowned by the train's roar. Her life snuffed out in a moment of careless joy. Her story was a weight, her eyes holding mine, as if she needed me to carry it, to keep her real, to anchor her to a world she'd lost. I listened, my room dim, the moonlight spilling through the window, her figure faint but solid, her words weaving a tapestry of loss that I didn't know how to hold. I'd sit on my bed, the floor cold under my bare feet, the world outside fading as she spoke, her presence a bridge between my life and hers, a connection that felt both sacred and terrifying. My aunt's voice echoed in my mind, a story she'd told me about a girl she'd seen as a child standing in her garden, her dress soaked, her eyes empty. Speaking of a river that took her, I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, a thread weaving through my own fear, whispering that I wasn't alone in this. I told my father one night, the words spilling out over dinner, my voice trembling with the need to be believed. His face changed, his eyes growing distant, his silence a wall that shut me out, cold and unyielding. I stopped talking about her after that, her name a secret I buried deep. But she stayed, her shadow a constant companion, her gaze a reminder that I'd seen something I couldn't unsee. I felt her in the quiet moments, her presence a weight in the air, her story a burden I carried alone. My mother noticed, her eyes soft with worry, but I didn't speak, afraid of the distance I'd seen in my father's face, afraid of what it meant. I tried to forget her, to lose myself in the routine of school, but she was there, in the corners of my vision, her figure faint but persistent, her eyes dark with a truth I couldn't escape. At school, things grew stranger. I was in second grade, often alone in the classroom during recess. The other kids' taunts too sharp to face, their words like stones I couldn't dodge. My teacher, kind but weary, let me stay inside, drawing on the whiteboard, the markers scent sharp in the quiet room. One day she was there, the girl, her hand guiding mine, the marker tracing shapes I didn't choose, circles, lines, a face with eyes too large, too sad. My teacher froze, her eyes wide, her voice soft but edged with worry as she asked who'd drawn it. I said my friend, my voice small, my heart pounding, and her face tightened, her words gentle but heavy with concern. Later I learned she'd told my parents I might be schizophrenic, using my bullying as an excuse to push for a move, her fear a mirror to my own. I didn't see her after that, but I felt her presence a whisper in the quiet, a reminder that she'd been real, that she'd chosen me for a reason I couldn't grasp. My mother's voice echoed, a story she'd told me once about seeing a boy in her childhood home, his figure faint, his eyes sad, watching her from the stairs. She'd stopped talking about him too. Her mother, my grandmother, warning her to keep such things secret, to avoid the weight of others' doubt, a lesson I learned too late. Years later, another spirit found me. I was in 3rd or 4th grade, on a school trip to a beach, the air sharp with salt and the cry of gulls, the waves a steady rhythm against the rocks. We walked a footpath by the shore, the sand soft under my sneakers, my classmates' chatter, a distant hum. I saw him before I meant to, a man in a faded jacket walking beside me, his face weathered, his eyes heavy with a grief that pressed against my chest. My friend beside me didn't notice, her laughter unbroken, but he spoke, his voice low, like the tide pulling back, steady but inevitable. He said he'd died in June 1994, fishing with friends when a storm hit. Their boat splintered against the rocks, their bodies lost to the sea. His story was a current, pulling me under, his eyes holding mine, as if he needed me to know, to carry his truth into the light. I listened, my steps slowing, the world fading to his words, the beach a blur of sand and sky. My grandfather's voice surfaced, a story he'd told me about a sailor he'd seen as a boy, standing on a pier, his clothes dripping, his eyes fixed on the horizon, speaking of a ship that never returned. I pushed the thought away, but it clung to me, a shadow weaving through my own fear, whispering that the dead don't always rest. When I got home, I asked my sister to look it up, saying I'd overheard it somewhere, my voice casual to hide the tremor. She found the news report. 6 men lost in a storm, their names listed, their story matching his, down to the date, the boat, the rocks. I felt him after that, his presence a weight in my dreams, the sea's roar echoing in my sleep, his gaze, a reminder that the dead don't always leave. I stopped looking at strangers too long, afraid of who might speak, afraid of the stories they'd ask me to carry. But they found me still. In the quiet moments, their figures faint, their eyes heavy with truths I didn't want. My brother saw it too, my habit of staring at empty spaces, his voice soft as he asked who I was talking to. My sister remembered my childhood stories, her nods a quiet confirmation, her eyes carrying a belief I clung to. My mother told me she saw spirits as a child. Her mother, my grandmother, saying the same, a thread weaving through our family, tying us to something beyond, a gift or a curse I can't name. My grandmother's story lingers, her tales of a woman in white who stood at her bedside, her eyes empty, her hands cold, watching her sleep, a presence that followed her through the years. The memories pile up, a tapestry of faces no one else saw, their stories a weight I carry, heavy but precious. I stopped looking for answers at the museum where a worker spoke of children's deaths on the tracks, their stories buried to keep the town's history clean. but I know what I saw, what I felt, and their gazes linger, their stories a weight I carry, a truth that binds me to them. My father's silence haunts me, his distance a question I'm too afraid to ask, his eyes carrying a fear I recognize but can't touch. I feel them still, the girl on the tracks, the man from the beach, their presence a shadow that follows me, their truths a weight I'll carry always. Sometimes in the quiet of the night I see her again, her dress pale, her eyes dark, standing at the edge of my room, calling me back to the place where the world broke open. The man is there too, his jacket damp, his voice a whisper, his story a tide that pulls me under, a bridge between the living and the lost, a story that's mine to tell if only I can find the courage to speak. You've made it through 10 stories, but that uneasy feeling in your chest? That doesn't leave so easily. Because these weren't just stories. They were reminders that even the calmest nights can unravel into something much darker. That fear can find its way into locked rooms. That sometimes what we call just our imagination is the only warning we get. But this was only the beginning. There are more stories out there. More nights like this one, and more truths that refuse to stay buried. If you're still with us, and still curious, then subscribe, tap the notification bell, and return for the next descent. Because the next night might be darker, the next story colder, and next time you may not just be the listener, you may be living the next tale we tell.